Akedah project.
We invite you to join.
One story, many angles.
Come learn with us.
My name is Miriam Kabakov, and I am the executive director at Eshel. Eshel is an organization that works towards inclusive Orthodox LGBTQ communities, and we work with individuals and families. And I am sitting here today with Yocheved Lindenbaum, who is an Eshel mom, and she's also a chaplain. And we're really delighted to have you here today, Yocheved, and having this conversation with me. Yocheved, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your son?
As I was thinking about how I present myself, I realized that as we discuss the Akedah, a very important part of my background becomes resonant. When somebody would ask me what the hashkafa, what the outlook, religious outlook in my house was, my answer was Holocaust. I am the third child of two Holocaust survivors, Hungarians, so their time in concentration camp was short, but it was part of their lives till their last breath. And it has had an effect on how I see everything in my children, Tanakh, my work, really everything I do. I got a degree in Judaic studies, and I worked on, I have most of a master's in Tanakh, and I taught for 20 years in Judaic studies in a local day school. I'm the mother of 5 children, mother-in-law of 4, grandmother of 11, and my youngest son, Yitzi, is 24, and he is gay. He told us when he was 16. And he is every Jewish mother's dream. And I think Miriam, would say I'm not exaggerating. He's adorable. He is truly brilliant. He's good looking. He's a nice kid. He has a magnificent voice. He's a poetic writer. He's got a musical mind, a mathematical mind, whatever. He excelled in everything he did in high school. And we are very close. Maybe that's sort of stereotype, but we are very close. And I would say I have different levels of closeness with all of my kids. My kids know me and I know them. Right now, Yitzi is a student. He did 5 years in Hesder in Yeshivat Har Etzion. And now he is living in Jerusalem in an apartment with 3 other guys and is a student of math and computers at Hebrew U.
Can you share some of the major challenges that you've had parenting Yitzi in your Orthodox community?
In thinking about it, I would put it all into 3 words: shame, anger, and maybe guilt. So the initial, when Yitzi told us that he was gay and I was completely clueless, I knew that I wasn't ashamed of Yitzi, but I knew that being gay in the Orthodox community came with shame. And so we were afraid to tell any of our friends, or we were afraid to tell our siblings or because of how we would be looked at. And I guess the shame would be because we had made a very definite decision that this child is our child and belongs in our house, and nothing, and we hadn't yet thought about navigating if he has relationships or if we hadn't thought about any of that, but we knew that he wasn't going anywhere. He was ours. The anger, I would say, I have to add sadness also. When Yitzi told us the brother right above him was about to get engaged. And in my mind, I had always thought about family as you kind of even out. I have 4 sons and 1 daughter. And as I would get older, I would have 5 sons and 5 daughters. And wouldn't that be wonderful? As somebody who really was missing having those girls around me, I was looking forward to that. And so there was a sadness that I had when I realized that wasn't what I was going to have. And that maybe our family would be an even number, but it would be different. And so there was a sadness about that. There was a sadness understanding that the community that we've chosen to be a part of will not appreciate my son for what he is. And that's tragic for B'nai Israel. It's tragic that his mind his halachic, innovation and his, I mean, I don't even know what else to say, will not be something that's appreciated because he is gay. And that's just ridiculous to me, but it's also true. And so that's my anger, and guilt. I said I might have guilt, but I don't know if I really feel guilty. In the beginning, maybe there was, did I make this happen? Did I cause this to happen? Or there's the guilt of, is what I'm doing correct? So that pretty much sums that up.
Let's talk about the Akedah. How would you say the story of the Akedah resonates with you as a parent of an LGBTQ child? I know we've spoken a lot about this before.
Once again, Holocaust terminology comes to my mind, which is in the Holocaust discussion, you talk about something called choiceless choices, that people had choiceless choices. And in the Akedah, Abraham was given a choice, but it really was a choiceless choice, right? The choice is to kill your son or to deny the God that you have discovered on your own and that is the all-knowing, the omnipotent and the omniscient. And if he's omnipotent and omniscient, then A, he must know what he's talking about, and B, what's going to happen to me if I go against his word. And yet I have this child that I love, and I'm not supposed to, I love him. What kind of a choice is that actually? So I would say that I relate to that in that it's a choiceless choice. I thought initially, and the choice is to tell my son that, I'll accept him as gay, but as soon as he acts on it or, exposes himself in any way or whatever, then I will have to cast him out. I don't know, no longer relate to him. I don't find your punishment, or the other choice is to embrace him completely and totally and know that God is not pleased that I'm embracing somebody who is an abomination. And let's stop there for a second.
Okay.
Because with time, I definitely related, with time, all of those, so many of those things changed.
Yeah.
Right? The idea of what does God want from me? And what does Abraham want? And I know one of the other questions that you asked we're going to ask is how am I like Abraham? Mm-hmm. And how are parents of gay kids like Abraham? An interesting thought came to my mind. We want justice. And I'm thinking of the story of Abraham with stone, which comes right before this, where he's arguing with God. At the idea of his having a conversation with God, of having a almost equal conversation with God, and him saying, "You sure you want to do this? Do you really need to destroy this whole city?" And arguing and arguing and arguing until we get to a point where Abraham realized that there is justice. What else do we want as parents that Abraham wanted? We want fairness, right? We want chesed in the world. And we want an open tent, just like Abraham had. We want an open tent from all sides that lets people come in and be in our tent everywhere. So that's how I'm like Abraham in many ways. And also, it's funny because my Yitzchak, that is his name, right? My Yitzchak was there 6 years between him and the brother above him. And he was very wanted. He was very pined for. And I actually had a difficult pregnancy. And at one point we thought we lost the pregnancy, and I was at the doctor, and the doctor did a sonogram because he wasn't gonna end the pregnancy until he was sure that that's what should happen. And all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, look, a little beating heart. Oh, look, here's an arm, here's a leg." And I burst into tears. And my husband said to me, he goes, like, "Now you're crying? Like you should." And the doctor looked at him and said, "Of course now she's crying." And it was the parsha of, where Sarah says, "Acharei bloti hayta li edna," like after, now that I'm in my old age, I'm once again going to have my youth, meaning her period, or however you want to phrase that. But that's what I felt. I felt like, oh my God, this was over, and now it's not. And it was just so Yitzi was a wanted, desired, prayed for child, and that whole pregnancy was filled with will everything be okay at the end? And will he be well and healthy and all of those other things? And will I be well and healthy? Because like I said, it was challenging. So, and then to tell me that because he is who he is, I now have to think about how much I should include him in my life. So yeah, I'm like Abraham in that way.
Right.
Um,
Well, the first one is you thought it was going to be over, and then it wasn't. And that's the first Abraham, and now the second one is that he came out.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen. And I also just was thinking something that you just said that I never thought about, that in the chapter before this, Abraham is arguing not to destroy the city. Why didn't he argue not to kill his son?
Good question. I've also been asking myself for the last several years, why do we teach this to children? There are a lot of kids that get scared when we talk about this. We've had stories in our community where like kids go home and they say to their parents at the Shabbat table, so if God told you to shoot me with a gun, would you? Now, what does a parent say to that?
Mm-hmm.
Does he say, yes, I serve God, and so if that's what God told me to do, I would do that? Or, right, so that's what leads me to the interpretation that we discussed earlier yesterday about the Akedah. I was very fortunate that when I was in 9th grade, I had a teacher in central Manhattan. Her name was Ayala Levy Feldblum. She was only Ayala Levy at the time. And she is truly the student of the Chama Leibovitz. But for whatever reason, she's not one of the names that everybody knows at this point in time. And we learned the Akedah with her. So she, we turned to Va'elokim Nisat Avraham, and God tested is how we all read that. And most of the Mifrashim that you read say that's what it is. It was a test, right? And I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second. When you read all the exegetes, they say it's a test. It wasn't a test of his fealty. It was a test of his faith, not his belief. Right? It was a test of his faith. That here, God told him that the generations were going to come through Yitzchak, and now God is telling him to kill Yitzchak. And wait a second, how's that going to happen, right? And so Abraham had the faith, the trust in God. And I was thinking about the idea of when we play trust with kids. So they stand in a circle and they fall into people's arms, and they trust that people will catch them. So there's the level of knowing my friends are not going to. I believe that they're not going to let me fall. But then I actually have to do it. I have to fall back into their arms. And that takes a certain level of trust. It's no longer an intellectual pursuit. It's a real pursuit. But to go back again to the Va'elokim Nisat Avraham, Ayala quoted Nechama Leibovitz, who quoted the Abarbanel, who said that Nisa really can come from the word Nes, which means banner or flag. Or I'm sorry, I'm lost on the words. Sisma is the Hebrew word that I'm looking for, and that we are, as the children of Abraham, are able to stand under his banner of this is what our forefather was willing to do for God, and because Abraham did it, we don't have to. And then let's go back again. What is it that God wants of me as the parent of the gay child? And I don't think the Torah doesn't say that a parent has to cast out their child who says he's gay. The Torah doesn't say anything other than what happens if we catch two men having a specific act, which would mean, from rabbinic texts, that they would have to have been warned and they would have to have been seen by two witnesses, and then we react. Other than that, the only thing I'm supposed to do as the mother of a gay child, support my child the way I support all my children. Halachically, actually, once they turn whatever age, I have really no responsibility to him, but let's say socially. So that's what I've chosen to do.
Talk a little bit more, Yocheved, about your own faith and your own trust versus your belief. We talked a little bit more about like the progression of how your relationship with God, right? Like, you know, and where you're at now and how that has sort of helped you, I think, with your son.
So one of the things I found maddening actually is, as I've been through various travails in my life, is that you could think something through and think you put it in a box and you're done, and then something else happens and you have to rethink that issue which you've already thought about. So I thought I had like thought through. I read Yocheved and I learned this and that and whatever, and I really thought like I was okay with, you know, that with God doing with bad things happening to good people. And then my father died at a relatively young. He was relatively young, and then, you know, other things happened. I have an aunt who lost 3 living children and many pregnancies after going through the Holocaust and after whatever. And I'm like, I had to think it through again, and it made me angry that I had to think it through again. Also, what happens is that with time, I became more mature, and I realized I didn't have to answer every question. That it's okay. It's okay. You know, there's a Yiddish saying that a Jew doesn't die from a question. I didn't have to answer everything. Enough things have happened in my life at this point in time that I believe in God and that I trust Him. And the theology that I came to after dealing with Yitzi for 2 or 3 years, Yitzi being gay for 2 or 3 years, was that, you know, and being a chaplain and going through that training also helps here. God and I are good. We've known each other for over 50 years, and I am His servant, and I've tried to create a home and children who also want to serve God by taking care of His universe. And part of that is taking care of my child. And if I'm wrong, and maybe I am, then I'm ready to accept whatever hell there is to pay. And I mean that literally. And on the other hand, and here this fits very nicely into the time of year that we're in, of Elul, I believe that in the world to come, that after I die, I will stand before God with a lawyer and a prosecutor, and I'll have to answer for those things that I did that I was not supposed to do, and I'll be judged. But I also get a defense attorney, and my question to God is, what do you want me to do? Right? You gave me this child, this magnificent young man, and I did what I believed was right, as he is a child of God and I am a child of God, and I am this child's mother. I am this child's earthly mother. So I am doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And if I'm wrong, well, tell me what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm okay. That's the Holocaust survivor's child in me. I'll argue with God. I'll have that conversation.
Here's a question for you. If you were Avraham, what would you have done?
That's a hard one. So we talked last night about what would have happened if Avram would have made the other choice. What would have happened if Avram would have turned to God and said, no, I'm not doing this. And I imagine that at the end of the day, God would have said, good gesagt. You know, you're right, Avraham. You're right, Avraham. That either choice would have been the right choice. What would I have done if I was Avraham? I have to say I couldn't. But maybe that's because I'm a mother and not a father. I don't know. I mean, who's going to yell at my oldest son would now strangle me for saying that. I remember the feelings I had when my first child was born, and I was so sure I was going to go back to work and I was going to do whatever. And all I wanted to do was be with this child. I am mother with a capital M and Bubby with a capital B. And the thought of in any way not being the tiger that protects my child and being the one that hurt, I don't know. Maybe I would have such, if I could have reached the level of faith that Abraham represents to me, maybe I would have known that it's all going to be okay. But I think I would have failed this one. I'm sorry.
No judgment there. How do you think this story can help parents of LGBTQ children with their struggles, or can it even?
I think the image of understanding of sacrificing your child and doing it in tears, and maybe thinking about Abraham and knowing that Abraham really didn't want to do this. And maybe, as I said before, that Abraham, was willing to do it, and we don't have to because he did. Well, maybe the angel's voice is also the voice that we have to hear. Right? Al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar. Don't send out your hand to your son. Don't cast your son out. All those things that all the voices are telling you about your LGBTQ child, that's not the voice to listen to. You have to listen to the voice of God that's telling you, gather him back, hold him close, serve God together. I just thought of that right now. And I don't know if I could have said that 8 years ago. But I think maybe the malach's voice, that angel's voice, needs to have more resonance in this story than most of us tend to give it. Right? The angel, which is God talking, really. And that's the comfort that I think a person could get from the story. The story is very complex. It's very complex at every age, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. And it's only when we're very little children and even then a thinking child, it's a miserable story, of all the things we skip when we teach little children. I would say the Akedah is one of the ones we should skip. It's really hard to understand. But I guess I'll go back to those words, right? Al tishlach et yadcha el hana'ar. Do not send out your hand to hurt this child.